So what I would like you to do, without breaking it, just take this rubber band and start stretching it. Just stretch it for a while, and I'll check in with you in a few minutes. All right. So how? Gosh, okay. Aha. And my fancy clicker doesn't work. All right. I love it. Okay. So you may or may not be aware that May is National Mental Health Disorder Screening Month. And as a matter of fact, May 1st, or May Day, is particularly set for Anxiety Screening Day. And if anybody speaks French, you may know that May Day has a very specific meaning in French. You know how airline pilots are always up there worried that they're going to go down, and what do they yell? They yell, May Day, May Day, May Day. It's actually French for help me, help me, help me. So one of the ways that I like to look at anxiety, and I think we're going to talk about it from a variety of different standpoints tonight. We're going to really put it in the center of the kaleidoscope and just look at a lot of different aspects about it. When is it helpful? When is it not? And of course, that's why you're here. But one of the ways that I think about anxiety is it is our mind, body, spirit's attempt or way to try to give us some sort of information or a message. So it's up to us to then figure out what do we do with the message. This is a zebra. There is a wonderful book if you are interested in anxiety and stress. It's a classic in the field. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Has anybody read that book? Okay, all right. We are sort of like zebras in that we were evolved and born with this wonderful, wonderful stress response system called the flight or fight system. And both Dr. Brammer and I will talk about it a little bit. It's designed to do exactly what we would need to do if we were a zebra in the wild, which is get away from lions. Under direct threat, we have an immediate fear reaction. All kinds of stress chemicals get dumped in our body prepares for action, we go into action, and then when that event is done, the anxiety reaction or the stress reaction stops, hopefully, if we're a zebra. Then we go back to relaxing. So this is what our body is actually designed to do. The HPA axis, which we'll talk about, everything that secretes our cortisol and our adrenaline, gives us the ability to deal with direct threat. And then hopefully it goes back to a resting point. How's that rubber band? Are you stretching? Okay, keep stretching. Some amount of anxiety can be helpful, and you've probably seen similar illustrations before, right? Where if we have absolutely no anxiety, no stress in our life at all, we're either asleep or we're bored, okay? Here is where we're relatively calm. Eustress. What does eustress mean? I love that psychology and mental health, yes, has a word for good stress, right? There's distress and then there's eustress. Okay? So when we're experiencing productive stress or good stress, we are focused, we're energized, we're accomplishing our tasks, we're accomplishing what we're there to do. Our performance is optimal, right? Right at the top of that bell curve. But for each one of us, and sometimes the set point for each one of us is different, we'll very quickly go into distress, where stress and anxiety are not helping us accomplish daily tasks, they're not helping us focus, they're actually interfering with all of that. What we experience then, fatigue, exhaustion, illness, ill health, breakdown, and burnout. Okay? And then usually it takes us a while to kind of recover from that level of distress, even though we may still have anxiety. So if anybody had a chance to fill out your life stress scale, you don't have to tell me numbers or anything, but what did you notice about some of the items on that scale? What did you notice? What surprised you maybe or struck you about that scale?
Well, some of them seem like good things, like it shouldn't cause you stress.
Right. Do you have an example that you're thinking of?
Yeah, marriage, vacation.
Vacation? Vacation shouldn't be stressful, right? Marriage shouldn't be stressful, right? In fact, studies show that it is. any change to our homeostatic system, we humans are a lot like other animals. We like things in homeostatic balance, and a change can shift us out of balance, even if it's one that's good, even if it's one that we've really wanted for a long time, like a new job or graduation from a program. So there is a difference psychologically and emotionally and certainly physically between fear, or what the fight or flight system is designed to do, and chronic stress or anxiety. So how do we know, if you were to come in and see us in the clinic, if your anxiety is in that helpful range, or if it's gone to places where it's more difficult to manage? Some of the questions that we might ask you would be this: how much time during the day do you spend feeling anxious? Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night out of breath or feeling anxious? Is it something that you can pin down specific? And is that anything that you can take action about? Or is it just sort of general, just all the time you've got this lived experience of being anxious? Or is it starting to impact your other activities? Things that you used to do. Work out maybe, go to movies, sit still to read a book, cook something. Are those activities starting to change or be shortened because of your anxiety? Or social interactions, are you starting to limit those because of anxiety? Sometimes the things that we do to take care of ourselves when we're anxious, or our coping strategies, if we do them too much, they can also become unhelpful. So if I cope with my anxiety by vegging out in front of the TV with a bowl of ice cream, once in a while that's going to be fine, bless you. But what if I start doing that every night? Or what if the glass of wine becomes 2 or 3 and it starts to increase? And what if all of those things start happening? Then it might be time to sort of look at the coping strategies that I'm using for anxiety, and I've listed some up here. If I just notice that I'm spending more and more time sort of distracting myself from how I feel and how I'm doing, I would be curious about that, and that might be one thing that we would ask you about and help you explore. Things that used to make me happy don't make me happy anymore. The anxiety doesn't go away. So if I really used to cook dinner for friends and have friends over, or go out dancing, or go to art museums, or just get through the school day and feel pretty good, suddenly those things don't seem like they're working for me anymore. So I'm going to talk about the mind, the body, and the spirit. We believe wholeheartedly at Bastyr, and not just at Bastyr, that all of those things are indivisible. And the rest of the world definitely is catching on to that idea. So if our thoughts are anxious, our body and our feelings are going to join us. And if our body feels anxious, everything else is going to come along too. If we have anxious thoughts, especially while we're lying awake at night trying to sleep, we can perseverate. That just means we get stuck in a loop and we keep getting over and over and over the same thought in our head, same thought in our head. If we have insomnia, that's another sign that some anxiety is happening. And some catastrophizing. This can happen a lot if we're in school. We worry about a test that we're going to take, and instead of being able to go to sleep, we think, if I fail this test tomorrow, I'm doomed. That's it. I'm out of school. That's going to cause more anxiety. So in that way, we can really get ourselves in kind of a feedback loop, right? So the way I think about sometimes, if we're stuck in the past, if we have a lot of regret and a lot of pain about the past, then we sort of live in the past. If we have a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry about the future, then we're sort of stuck in the future. And the main thing, of course, that we're not in is our present. So one of the things that we would do here at the clinic is help you sit with a little bit about what's happening for you in your life and how in contact are you with that present. The body, I'm so glad Dr. Brammer is here. For sure, if someone were to come in and talk about anxious symptoms, we would advise you to always consult with your primary care physician and make sure that your body is doing all right. Sometimes underlying health conditions can look a lot like anxiety. And if you're on any medications for anxiety, certainly you want to consult with a physician before changing or adjusting. Sometimes they can have side effects when you lower or go off, including anxiety. So we'd want you to be careful and consult with that. I'm an existentially trained psychologist, which in one word basically means that I'm looking a lot at the meaning in people's lives and in the meaning of their own experience and what the lived world is like. And when we look at anxiety, we really do talk about it as some sort of message. One way to look about it, if we flip that kaleidoscope a bit, is it's a message from our mind, body, spirit that something's going on with us. There's some information there that if we can sit with it and explore it, might have some really rich information. So, for example, we might be stepping off of our own authentic path, or something might be happening in our lives that we need to deal with and address that we're not quite sure how to do yet. And sometimes we'll just feel that as anxiety. If we can listen to what anxiety can tell us, a lot of times it'll go away on its own. A lot of ways when we sit with the underlying experience, the anxiety won't seem so unmanageable. So rather than being stuck in the past or stuck in our present, ideally we live in the present, stuck in the future, because the present is what we've got, right? Of course, I will have a cartoon for you. We have the savage chickens, and here's Freud with a chicken saying, the bears in your dreams represent childhood fears. Can you remember a time when you felt unsafe? And the chicken says, well, there was the time Mom locked me in a room full of bears. So the body doesn't know if the anxiety or the fear that we have is something happening right now in the immediate present that we need to take care of, or if it's something that happened 10 years ago, or if it's something that we're worried about might never happen. The body's response is the same. So when we experience stress, this is a state, and again, it's very different for all of us at different times in our lives. So we may encounter stressors or life situations or boundary situations that our previous methods of coping don't seem to be working, and we'll be anxious, right? We've probably experienced that. If we feel like there's a discrepancy between what the demands are of a situation, physical, emotional, spiritual, any of those, versus what we think we can meet that with, how well we can cope, we'll experience stress. Here are some, and marriage is actually that's divorce. But if we squeeze the cake slices together, that could be marriage. Okay. Graduation, traffic, birth of a new child. One of the most stressful times for couples, by the way. Marital happiness kind of goes up in a dual bell curve. Marital happiness is highest the first couple of years, goes up. Birth of the first child goes down. Parents are probably saying, and then eventually it goes back up again. So depending on where we are in our lives, we're going to have different stressors. Stress can be acute or it can be chronic. The kind of stress that has the longest health outcomes and the greatest possibility of physical disease is going to be chronic stress. And it really depends on what else is going on. There can be background stressors or daily hassles. How many of you have a commute of more than 30 minutes a day? Pretty okay. So it may or may not be a daily hassle for you, sort of depending on what else you have going on in your life. It might be in the background. If there's another triggering stress event in your life, though, it might be harder to deal with. Personal or life events, that's what that life stress scale is like, things that we go through just in the course of living our lives. And then cataclysmic events, things that we're unprepared for. Death of a spouse, death of a parent, divorce, death of a partner, some sort of natural disaster, something happening to one's children, something like that, okay? It's the chronic stress that we want to look at because that's going to affect your whole biopsychosocial functioning. So here's that HP axis we were talking about, and I know that Dr. Brammer has got a lot of information about this as well. But basically, the hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal, this is part of our neuroendocrine system that, as you can see, affects pretty much every human experience we have. And when we're activating a whole lot, how's that rubber band doing? Okay, look at that. All right. So think about the zebra. We'll go back to our friend the zebra here. The HPA axis on a zebra is probably pretty taut and pretty tight and pretty ready. If there's a lion, whoosh, it gets used once, then it goes back to normal. If the zebra is chased by a lion every day, it's a little bit analogous to us if we have chronic stress that doesn't snap back and go back to normal. Eventually, our bodies stress levels, stress hormones, fatigue level, burnout level, all those things we've been talking about, will get stretched out of shape. And that's pretty much how we'll feel. So thank you for doing that. All right, this is a whole bunch of stuff about cortisol, the main stress hormone that I know Dr. Brammer's going to talk about. Why do we perceive certain things as stressful and other things not? Some of it is us, some of it is our temperament, some of it is what else we have going on in our lives. Some of it is how predictable it is. If you have the same darn commute every day, you're used to it, it may be irritating, it may be frustrating, but it's probably not going to be stressful. If something happens and the length of that commute doubles, that's a change, it might be stressful. So things that we deal with every day, if they're predictable, they're a little easier to deal with. If we feel like we have some control over it, we may not actually have control over it, but if we feel like we're in control of it, that helps too. If your schooling or your job is really stressful right now because you just took on a whole bunch of new work, but it was your decision and you wanted it, you feel like you're in control of it to some extent, it's easier to deal with than stuff that's not at our control. And how much personal meaning does it have? If you are going to go have coffee with a friend, you're stuck in traffic, you're half an hour late, you call, you tell her you're on your way, no big deal, probably not a big deal. If you're going to the job interview for the dream job, and all of a sudden I-5 is backed up and you are not going to make it on time, the stakes are much higher, stress level is going to be a lot higher. Here's just a little visual about what we're talking about, right in the middle of all of the biopsychosocial model, and down here I've added spiritual meaning-making stuff. That is every bit as important as the rest of it. Chronic stress, so chronic use of this wonderful fight or flight system will eventually be associated with all kinds of things. Greater risk for stroke, greater risk for heart disease, decreased immune function, GI trouble, ulcer trouble, muscle pain, insomnia, depression, and of course anxiety disorders. When anxiety gets elevated enough and stuck enough that a psychologist or a counselor, a naturopathic physician would say, you have an anxiety disorder. Okay? Yeah. All right. I'm going to skip a couple things here because I want to talk about, well, what do we do? What do we do? Bastyr's own Leanna Standish gave a talk on spirituality and health a while ago. She does that a lot. And she asks a question of her patients that I just find absolutely lovely. How is your spirit? Regardless of what your religious or spiritual affiliation is, I think we can all resonate with that idea of how does your spirit feel? My spirit feels dampened. My spirit feels pretty good right now. We know that social isolation is also associated with poor health outcomes and a lot of other stress. So there's a lot of health benefit from some sort of community, whether that's a religious community, a family community, or a work community. Religious beliefs or faith, they've done a number of studies on this in health psychology, tend to kind of go in one of two ways. It can either be a source of a lot of stability, a lot of purpose and meaning in that sense of belonging, or it can be a source of stress. It can be a source of rejection, depending on what somebody's situation is. It just depends. So, when we're talking about intervention and treatment, I'm going to start again with the biological. Here are all some of the things that you've probably seen, done, looked at, or tried that we might encourage you at Bastyr to explore that you can do directly. Exercise is fantastic for a number of reasons. One of the things it does, though, is it helps burn off those stress chemicals. It takes those really high cortisol levels and it helps use them up and bring your body back to a calmer resting state, as well as all of the other good things that it does. Bless you. It also releases a lot of feel-good chemicals that help balance out your mood. So it releases serotonin and dopamine and endorphins and enkephalins too. Meditation, Tai Chi, and Qigong. Doing any sort of meditation, whether it's seated or moving, can be deeply effective, especially when done every day. for anxiety, even up to the level I found out during my research of folks who've been diagnosed with panic disorder. Sleep hygiene. A lot of times, if we're not sleeping well because of our anxiety, we need to work with that first so that we can start working with the anxiety. It doesn't do any good to try to work with folks to help them talk through their anxiety or work through it in some way if you're simply not sleeping. And a lot of us are pretty chronically sleep deprived, and that changes a little bit for everybody. But especially if we're losing sleep because of our anxiety, then we got to look at both. Breathing exercises, just simply breathing. In fact, take 30 seconds to just do that now. If you put your hands right on your diaphragm so you can actually feel your hands move. And when you breathe in, and then breathe out, the breath out ideally lasts longer than the breath in. That will calm us. Ooh, see, and the energy in the room just relaxed. We forget to breathe. We hyperventilate a lot, especially when we're anxious. Progressive muscle relaxation, which is really lovely if you're lying in bed anxiously trying to sleep. There are things that we can help you with that will help you sleep. Elimination of sugars and sympathomimetics, or things that are stimulants and mimic adrenaline and cortisol in the body. And I know Dr. Brammer will talk about that as well. There are certainly dietary things that we can all do to just be less anxious in general. Massage and acupuncture and biofeedback, all of which, by the way, are available here at the Bastyr Clinic as well as with your fine providers, I'm sure. Any sort of somatic therapy that can move the lymph around, move the chi, relax the energy, can work really well. Pharmacotherapy. Psychological interventions, counseling, of course. What sort of counseling would work best for you depends on who you are and what you like to do. So counseling providers would ask you questions about what has helped for you in therapy before, if you've been, and if you haven't been, what some of your concerns might be about therapy and what you're really looking for. Whether you want something that's a little more client-focused or something that you're going to be given more sort of assignments and homework to do. Most counselors will modify their approaches for you. Some things I know that we use and talk about a lot: sleep hygiene. I can't talk about the importance of sleep to an overall happy life enough. Sleep is so important. Exercise we've talked about. Coping skills role playing. If this is really a situation where our anxiety is geared to a very specific situation, for example, at work, we're going to ask for a raise and we're terrified and anxious about it. We might help you with some very specific coping skills role playing in order to be able to do that. If your stress and your anxiety is not something that is easily fixable with a solution-focused coping technique, maybe not easily fixable, but what if, let's say, you've just received a serious health diagnosis, and this is going to be a chronic condition that you're going to have to learn how to manage. There is stress associated with that, and so a lot of the coping strategies that we'll talk with you about and explore with you will be more emotion-focused coping when dealing with chronic illness. And we see this a lot. Cognitive behavioral therapy or client-centered therapy, really depending on you. Acceptance and commitment therapy for children and adult. Acceptance and commitment therapy is a little paradoxical. It works really well in situations where you have this experience of, I'm anxious and I don't want to feel anxious. And you come in to see us and say, please make my anxiety go away. Please, I don't want to feel that way anymore. Guess what we're going to tell you? Any guesses? Can we make your anxiety go away? Right. Pay attention to it. What we're going to actually help you do, assuming that your anxiety is not so high that you're not sleeping, you're not eating, and some things have gone off the rails for you a little bit, we're going to help you how to sit with it and how to learn from it. We're going to work with you on being able to accept your feelings and accepting that they all have an ebb and a flow, and that if we allow ourselves to sit still and actually feel our anxiety or our sorrow or our grief or our anger. No matter how fearful we might be that we're always going to feel that way and it's never going to get better, it changes and it gets better. It moves on its own. So yes, acceptance and commitment therapy is also a therapy designed to help you really explore what a meaningful life is for you, not what I think a meaningful life is. And what might that anxiety be trying to tell you? Expressive arts, journaling, arts, singing, dancing, any other modality that you might use. I'm reminded of a client situation that I worked with pretty extensively. She had panic disorder and she had a lot of panic attacks. And unfortunately, she had them every time she drove over water, which in Seattle, as you might imagine, is a challenge. And so one of the things that we worked with was she always got a warning sign that she started feeling a bit like she was going to have trouble breathing or she couldn't breathe. And then she knew she was going to have a panic attack. She loved to sing and she loved music. So here's what we did. We suggested to her that when she felt that first sign of, uh-oh, I'm having trouble breathing, that she burst into song and hold it for 4 minutes of singing, which is one really good torch song or pop song. The idea being that even in a panic attack, which is a really extreme elevation of anxiety, it's going to last on average for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then the body will bring you back down. So she's tricking her body into realizing that, well, if I'm singing out loud, I can breathe, I'm going to be okay. And in that way, start affecting her own body in a very positive way. So she drove over the bridge, began to have that feeling. This was in rush hour traffic, pulled over to the side, I'm happy to say, and burst into song and was singing for 4 minutes. She was still singing when the highway patrol came over and knocked on her door and said, "Is everything all right with your car?" And continued to sing while handing over her license and registration. But, so there are different ways that we can work with panic symptoms. If we have kids or teenagers that are experiencing anxiety for whatever reason, something's happening in the home or there's just that's how they're feeling, we've got all kinds of play therapy and art therapy that works really well if we're not going to look at a child and say, tell me about the existential nature of your anxiety. That doesn't usually work. Some social support we've talked about a lot. Connection to our heart, spirit center. Connection to what is most deeply meaningful for us. Connection with life issues. Connection with our own health, our own mortality. Connection with nature. And whatever spiritual and religious traditions we have. A lot of times when we're chronically anxious, we put those things on a shelf. We put them aside. So we'd be curious in exploring with you if it might be helpful to bring those back out and connect again with what has meaning for you. It also will pull you right into the present, right now. And finally, eventually we hope it's about perception. So one chicken is saying, it's like staring out across a bleak and barren desert and knowing that I must cross it and that it will be a painful and potentially soul-destroying experience. And the other chicken says, dude, it's just another Monday. And that is the end of my talk. I will turn it over. Thank you.
When I sit down with a patient and I am trying to figure out with them where to start. So people walk in and I don't know them or maybe I haven't seen them for a while and things have shifted and changed. We sit there in the room together, and when we sit in a room together as humans, we get a sense of who we are. Dr. Davis does the same thing. You sit down with people, you feel each other's energetically, and you start asking questions. Where are you? What's working for you? What's not working for you? And as an ND, one of the things I always want to do is look at your duties of daily living, or the sort of aspects of daily living. How do you sleep? How do you eat? Where do you find happiness? Where do you find fulfillment? And what's not working about this whole picture? Where are you stuck? Some patients are feel that they're stuck in their emotions. some in their thoughts, and some in their bodies. They have pain. That can be a stopper. So when you have anxiety, we've already talked about that, and you all know what it is. So stress or anxiety, that's sort of one of the first things I want to figure out. How much is it interfering with your life, your daily life? And so mom and kids and fighting and not enough sleep the night before. Are we still in stress, or are we in anxiety? Work. Yeah, I felt like that before. Sometimes our bodies and minds can't tell the difference. And when we get to that place, we have to come to a meeting of where to start. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people have anxiety in the US. In fact, in the US, more of us have anxiety than Europe. For some reason, the percentages of the population in Europe with anxiety are about anywhere from 4 to 8% less. Don't know why. Maybe it's because we're a bigger population. Maybe it's just the way things are structured there. And we are Americans, you know. We're busy, busy people. So often anxiety and depression come together, as you said. And anxiety and depression can also occur when people are facing pain, chronic pain, and illness. What comes first? It doesn't matter. What matters is here you are stuck in this snake eating its tail, where they both feed each other. Okay? And it's a little simpler if your anxiety is only in certain situations. I have a friend whose anxiety is if she has to get in a car and drive anywhere outside of 1.5 miles of her home. That's it for her. Anything above 1.5 miles is really, really challenging for her. So we set a lot of things up so we are staying within that 1.5 miles. Or I drive if we go farther than that. The most common, which many of you might relate to, the most common trigger for anxiety is public speaking. And that's a huge number of people in this country. It took me years of teaching to get comfortable doing this and to feel like I am actually talking to you, you are talking back to me. But public speaking, there's just lots of it. So biochemistry, I don't need to go into because Dr. Davis did that. And one of the things I like to think about when people are feeling anxious, overwhelming anxiety periodically or regularly in their life, is where is this coming from? So if we need to rebalance the higher brain centers and the limbic part of the brain, which is the ancient brain, it's like the first part of our brain to develop. And it is the fight or flight, sort of the origin of where that gets triggered and sends to and from. So fear and anger are the primary emotions that come from that. Run away, attack, or freeze and hope nobody notices you. The thing that is most interesting is when stress goes on a long time, because of that connection between the brain, the limbic and the hypothalamus, the higher brain centers and the hypothalamus, those messages are going directly through your body to every single system in the body. So your endocrine system is affected, your digestive system, your nervous system, your muscles, your lungs, and your immune system. Everything is affected, especially with chronic long-term stress. So myalgia and muscle pain, digestive difficulties, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, inability to tolerate food or a craving only for certain foods, all of those things. And peripheral circulation or peripheral constriction of blood vessels in your feet and hands. So you can end up with people who are chronically stressed and have swelling in their feet or hands after a really stressful day, or in their face, places where, because sodium is absorbed at a higher rate by the kidneys when you're stressed, cortisol loves to have you gather in that sodium to keep the cortisol being made and distributed. That makes you swell up. And when that happens, you can, the pain and bloating can actually make you very uncomfortable. The liver releases blood sugar into the circulation. I mean, all of this is happening. Breaks down blood sugar, releases it into the circulation, and then what happens is insulin has to be released by the pancreas. Cortisol extends that. Over time, people can become hypoglycemic. And hypoglycemic can actually trigger more anxiety, so it can be self-feeding. Digestion is inhibited. There we go. So what does that mean? As Dr. Davis said, exercise is one of the best ways to take that accumulated energy from those stress hormones and expend them in something that's more fruitful than overthinking or the rest of the cascade. I see patients who have high blood pressure, who have headaches, nausea, blood sugar dysregulation, frequent illness because they've been chronically stressed for an extended period of time. Their immune system is impacted. They catch every cold or flu that comes along. Muscle pain, as I said, high cholesterol levels. Cortisol can elevate cholesterol. And depression, anxiety, insomnia, and impaired function. Sometimes you'll have difficulty making decisions or any decision at all when you're overthinking and just perseverating. So the first place I start, sleep, food, work, your activities and social interactions. So how do we address that? When you're chronically stressed, are you really interested in creating time to make food for yourself? Most people are not. And depending on what stressful circumstances you're in, if it's a shift and change in life, you're divorced, suddenly you're cooking for one. Your children have left home. Suddenly you're cooking for two and you're sitting with somebody you haven't had a conversation with about anything but kids and bills and home and activities and schedule, potentially for quite a long time. So how do we address that fact when we know that eating a really well-balanced diet with protein, carbohydrates, fiber, and fat can actually help manage anxiety? Rebalancing blood sugars by eating small, frequent meals that are high in nutrients, especially high in proteins, can actually help calm the body down. Hypoglycemia, skipping meals, avoiding meals makes it worse. And one of the things that happens is you don't have any appetite. You get up in the morning, you're exhausted, but you're not hungry. You want coffee, because coffee will perk you up and make your mind kick in and help you be able to start going through your list of tasks for the day. But food is actually what you need to choose first. So, sleep. Calming exercise, as well as expending exercise, food and meals, and especially food and meals that are healthier in their base. So one of the things I like to do is make sure people know the difference between proteins. What's a good protein? What's a less optimal protein? So the burger's not such a great choice. So some simple rules are the less legs on your protein, the better it is for you. No legs, better than 2 legs, better than 4 legs most of the time. The exception to that rule is wild game, which you can treat like a 2-leg, because the fats in a wild game and the nutrients in a wild game outweigh the fact of the higher fats sometimes. Grass-fed beef is better than slaughterhouse. I shouldn't say slaughterhouse, but feedlot beef. That's a better term. Because of the fats that are in the animal at the time you eat it. Healthier fats are better for us and help to keep our brain regulated and working well. Fats are also used to create a very healthy cell wall around every single cell in our body. The membrane, the outside covering, which allows nutrients in and waste products out and keeps things moving and going, made out of fats and some minerals. Do you have a question? Okay. So complex carbohydrates. So why complex carbohydrates? Simple, they are higher in fiber. Do all of you know this stuff? Is this really clear to everybody? So I'll just go really fast through this. So complex carbs are higher in fiber, and so they take longer to break down, thus having a slower glucose insulin swing. And of course, then we get to complex carbohydrates are higher in nutrients. While that apple strudel may taste really good, the broccoli is a better choice. Okay, and the nutrients in the food also is really important for the biochemistry of our bodies to occur, normal biochemistry. I'm going to skip through this part. Yeah. So, nutrients. And these nutrients help re-regulate the pathways within our body. In a way, I think of them as nature's pharmaceuticals, and always start with these. Even if pharmaceuticals are indicated for treatment, you always want to make sure you include all of these things to support the pharmaceuticals, because it will allow you to rebalance and perhaps get off your medications much more quickly and back to a more full enjoyment of your life and being in a body. Yeah?
If you get your blood work done and your levels are all in the normal range,
Right.
you still need to increase it?
Well, one of the things I like to say is when you're under stress, you're burning through nutrients much, much more quickly. The students who come into our program need to change and increase the high nutrient foods because they're burning at a level of a competitive athlete just from the way they're working their brain every day and the amount of energy they're expending trying to learn. So when you're under stress, when your life is pushing and pulling at you, I always think of those cartoons where you get stretched thin and then wide and back. When you're feeling like that, your body is going to burn through nutrients much more quickly because you're responding to stimulus faster, at a much faster rate. You are hypersensitized to any input. So someone who normally says hi to you walks by, they don't say hi, people immediately can think something's wrong. What's wrong here? Where normally on a good day, you'd just say hi to them and walk by and not even notice it. Does that make sense? So those are some of the reasons why. Plus, we all inherit our biochemistry. And it's kind of this mysterious part of us that we don't understand fully. Every physiology book, biochemistry book is full of, we're not sure why this does this, but currently we think this. So some of the nutrients that are really helpful when you're anxious include tryptophan and the metabolites of tryptophan. Something that people may have heard of is 5-hydroxytryptophan. Helps people get to sleep, stay asleep. Can have some anxiolytic effects in some people, but actually can promote anxiety in others. Everybody's different. 10 people in this room, same complaint, would need to be treated differently. Your choice of therapy, your choice of treatment using botanicals or herbs or hydrotherapy or whatever we're going to use would differ. So, because you're unique. Magnesium and some of the other minerals. So, magnesium, calcium, because they're used in biochemical reactions that are more calming, help to promote serotonin, help to promote decrease lactic acid buildup in your muscles, reduce pain, tension, reduce muscle tension, which can also drop blood pressure. Too much of it, however, causes diarrhea, so it's always a balance. Magnesium and other minerals, botanical treatments. How many of you know about herbs and botanicals? A lot of you? A little bit? So there are a lot of ways to use botanicals. You can use them as teas, as tinctures, as glycerates, as acetracts. I mean, there are lots of forms. However, the truism for herbs is that there are a category of botanicals called nervines. Nervines are restorative to the nervous system. It's just this old-fashioned general term. And they can be restorative and push metabolism, or they can just be tonics and allow the body to reshift itself. So some really good examples of some of these nervines are milky oat seed or the oat kernels. Oatmeal is a phenomenal food, especially the whole oats where you're getting all of this nervous system restoration, the chemicals that help restore the nervous system. With the tonic herbs, they can take a long, long time to work, like 2 months or more. They are also very safe, so you can use them with people who are fragile without any harm of any kind. So tonics are great, and I use those in the base of formulas or in the base of a treatment, but I'll often put more active herbs that will push a little bit, that will work in the limbic system or in the higher brain centers to rebalance that part of the brain. Or I'll add herbs like adaptogens. Adaptogens are herbs that help your body respond to stress. Whether that stress is chemical, physical, mental, emotional, situational, doesn't matter. Adaptogens are phenomenal for helping to restore whatever normal balance is to that HPA axis that Dr. Davis talked about. That feedback loop from the brain to the thyroid to the adrenals, ovaries, the whole testes, the whole system like that. You can use stimulating adaptogens, or you can use more relaxing or tonifying adaptogens. So some adaptogens that you might want to know about are herbs like Schisandra. There isn't any other name for that. It's always Schisandra. And it has a very specific sort of fruity taste, like kind of a rosy, citrusy flavor to it. Very distinctive. And being an herb, it has actions on many different areas of the body. So not only is it an adaptogen, but it's also a bitter. It protects the liver and kidneys. It is helpful for restoring immune function and digestion. So Schisandra is a great herb for people who have anxiety. That includes that oversensitive stress response, digestive and immune difficulties. Okay, so Avena and Schisandra. And maybe you're just so exhausted you can hardly get up. You have no energy in the day. So then I might think of herbs like Panax ginseng, which is Korean ginseng, or American ginseng, or Eleutherococcus, which is Siberian ginseng. And those herbs have more of a stimulating effect. So when you take those, you want to take them earlier in the day and not at bedtime, right? So one of the things that happens, I guess we don't have any, I'd write on the board if I had a little thing, but I can't see any here. So one of the things that happens, oh, thanks, that's perfect. So one of the things that happens when you're under chronic stress and your body is hypersensitized to a stress response, so this is cortisol. And this is time of the day. So let's say 6 a.m., noon, 5 p.m., and 11 p.m. Okay. So normally what happens in a human being is we wake up in the morning, our cortisol is supposed to be at its highest. It's supposed to get us out of bed and into our lives, right? So what can happen, what normally should be, is that you're sort of like this through the day, you dip a little, pretty steady, and then whoa, way down here, actually a little earlier. Let's do that. So about 9, 10, 11 p.m., you should be so tired and ready to go to bed. So what happens when you're chronically stressed? Well, you can get a number of pictures, but one of them is at 6 a.m., you have little to no cortisol. You are waking up, and it kind of goes up through the day, maybe up here, but boy, do you get that burst of energy at night, and don't go to bed. Any of you know that one? Yeah. So when that happens, you want to shift that back into normal, and you can use these adaptogens to do that. So you may do stimulating in the morning and more relaxing in the afternoon. So there's an herb called ashwagandha. It's a wonderful herb. It's also named withania. Both names are used interchangeably. And that herb is what's called a relaxing adaptogen. And a relaxing adaptogen decreases catecholamine synthesis to the extent of it can actually buffer out some of the anxiety hormones that are floating through your body. And it can help reset that clock. So often what I'll do is have people do ashwagandha at midday and late in the day, and maybe Eleuthero in the morning. Or you can put it together in a formula that has nervines in it as well as the adaptogens. And there are so many adaptogens we can use. I can stand here and list off 20 like that.
And foods, real foods?
And some of them you can take as foods. I like using the adaptogens in teas and tinctures. Depends on the person and how much assistance you need and what your lifestyle is, and if you'll actually take the time to make and drink a tea, which can be a problem for some people, especially early on when you're overwhelmed and it's hard to figure out how to recreate a structure in your life that's working for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So nervines, love nervines. You can also use some of the nervines to actually sedate and put you to sleep at night. I always, as part of the sleep hygiene, have patients unplug at least an hour before bedtime. None of this on the computer checking Facebook, chatting right before bed. Unplug, pull back, do something that's more restorative, quiet, calming. Write or paint or read something that's more emotionally and spiritually fulfilling for you. Maybe not the latest thriller. Yeah. So, for some people, work on a carpentry project. Whatever it is your hands like to do that helps your mind let go. Because bodies like to be calm. They like to be anchored a little more. So nervines. So we can use some nervines like skullcap, passion flower, California poppy, and have those right before bedtime, and they help the mind just let go and relax. Or a homeopathic combination named Calms Forte. I have used that with kids forever. It's one of the best combinations for teething and for fussy, colicky kids, just to help them feel better and more comfortable. And allow them to get to sleep, and maybe you get some sleep. Yeah. So nervines and adaptogen. What happens with these herbs, I'll get right to you, is that they, over time, they will normalize function. And I may be talking a lot about the body here, but if you can get the body calmed down, that decreases some of the load on the mind and the spirit, and give you room to be able to work on the rest of the issues or concerns, to be able to make decisions to have your life be more functional for you. Sleep. Number one, sleep. We both, I know, sleep. We've got to get you sleeping. We've got to get you eating. Yeah.
New York Times this week reported that new research that ADHD, attention deficit problems, are now being linked to a deficit of delta wave sleep.
Yes.
Are there any of these herbs that have been shown to help with delta?
Actually, there are. Yeah. So a lot of these nervine herbs, valerian root, has been shown to increase delta wave sleep. A lack of some B vitamins and minerals, or a deficiency of those, will show up as insomnia, irritability, inability to pay attention. So it's really important to analyze people's diet. We do that around here a lot. You go to nutrition, you come to an ND, you go to counseling. What they're going to want to do is look at what you're eating, look at how you're sleeping, because paying attention to those things can really help shift and clear the pattern that you are stuck in.
I find that if I take 200 milligrams of vitamin B6, it restores dreaming.
For you that works, but it is, and not everybody. For some people it's B1, and some it's B3, and some it's folic acid, and some it's B12, and some it's magnesium or C or zinc. It can be any of these nutrients. And did everybody get my handout? So there's more back around here somewhere. We'll make sure you get them. But the handout lists foods that you can find the vitamins and minerals from, okay? And there's also, I always include recipes, because I never ask anybody to change a diet unless I give them a way to do that. So you can use them or not use them for whatever works for you. But yeah. So the other thing I wanted to touch on briefly, and then we'll go to questions, is that there are some other tools. Dr. Davis talked about some of those, so massage, and I wanted to add in an acupuncture and biofeedback, but I also wanted to mention what's called hydrotherapy, which is the use of water therapeutically. And that is really amazing for restoring some of these normal sympathetic, parasympathetic patterns in the body. It helps to both detoxify and also to restore sleep and calmness. Yeah,
Where is that available around?
here.
Is it in here?
Here in the physical medicine department.
Is that just a hot bath?
It can be a hot bath and you can do it at home. However, it's hot bath and cold sheet wraps, or the use of alternating hot and cold while we use some electrical stimulation to help the body muscles relax and the digestive system work more fully. Or just you can go to the spa and do contrasting soaking in hot pools and then in the cold pool and then back, or you can do steam or sauna, but always alternating. It's that alternating between warm and cool, hot and cold. Or at bedtime, a neutral bath, like baby bottle temperature bath, little warmer than your own body temperature, not really hot, which can be stimulating, but a neutral bath with Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate salts, is so relaxing. And for some people, that can be a great addition to their regimen for sleep. And adding things like lavender, lemon verbena, or rose that are, when you smell them, create a calm, relaxed state is really helpful as well. Okay? So hydrotherapy, homeopathy, Bach flower remedies or flower remedies, constitutional homeopathy. How many of you are familiar with that? Okay, good. So homeopathy is a way of you assess a person by the picture of where they're stuck and what's working, sort of your personality and your current state of living. And you prescribe a remedy that, if given to somebody who wasn't you, could create similar pattern to symptoms that you have. Makes no sense whatsoever. This is quantum mechanics, way beyond my ability to explain, but can be profoundly helpful for people who are stuck in a pattern that is just not shifting and changing, even though you're putting forth effort in a lot of ways. Okay? And hands-on therapy, craniosacral, which is lovely, massage, being therapeutically touched. I mean, we all know that one. How good you feel when you're really stressed and someone you know comes up and just puts their hands on your shoulders. It can be really profoundly relaxing, shifting. So every single one of these treatments, and I have looked at, I can't tell you, 25, 30 studies in the last couple weeks. Every single study looking at anxiety shows that counseling therapy, talk therapy, some sort of behavioral modification talk therapy increases the effectiveness of treatment dramatically. So I will just, and I'm not a counselor, so I'm not getting no bang for my buck here, but it's really profoundly helpful for shifting and changing things. So, yeah.
Can you talk about what you found with biofeedback and the use of biofeedback?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to? So what's interesting about biofeedback is it can restore some of that, in a weird way, it can restore control to relaxation, which seems like a strange choice of words, but you learn how to use your own body to be able to let go and relax.
What is it?
Oh, biofeedback? Okay. So biofeedback is learning to use breathing, learning to use breathing to make change within your body. You can do it with something called the heart math machine, which by breathing and just relaxing, Your body, you can change and create pictures on a computer, which is odd, or you can actually be connected to a machine that as you change your blood pressure, change your breathing rate, decrease your pulse, gives you feedback that you're doing it correctly. And what happens is you learn how to do it consciously. So you can bring that into other avenues of your life. It's using your own body as a tool for helping to normalize your nervous system. Is that adequate, or would you like to add?
No,
Yeah, I think we're in questions, so why don't you come up here with me?